Okay, the recording has now started. Welcome to the 2023 LSTA application webinar. I am Sue Lynn Jones, the LSTA coordinator. And we'll just hop right in. So here's our agenda, a little bit about the LSTA program, a little bit about the community grants application software, some recommended subgrant application prep for everyone who's writing an application, an overview of the application structure, an overview of the whole review and ranking process. So what happens to your app and how do we determine if it gets funded or not? And then wrap up. I put these learning outcomes here because this is what I hope viewers will get out of this, right? And this is the reason that we're having this webinar. I'd like everyone to really understand the purposes of LSTA subgrants and the whole LSTA program, how and when to use community grants, the application portal, the software, understanding of how your project fits into LSTA applications and the measuring success framework. That's kind of a odd sentence, but the biggest challenge that I've found over the years is people have project ideas, but they're not sure how to make it fit into the application structure, right? And it's a very logical structure, and we'll go over that. And if anyone's having problems of how to make their project fit, like hopefully this webinar will address that. Understanding the review and ranking process, because it's going to be different this year, and who to ask if you have questions. And the answer to that is me, the LSTA coordinator. So strangely enough, some people don't know who to ask, right? And it's probably because they're not used to the grant maker being so accessible. But I'm here to answer any application questions anyone could ever possibly have. Okay. So does anyone want to say anything about this? We'll just move on. Okay. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to pop in here is the LSTA survey. LSTA has a some set surveys that everyone is required to do for LSTA projects. And since this is an LSTA project and I am LSTA funded, I am required to survey everyone who attends this webinar to see what you thought of it. And I can put that link in the chat. It has been a year since I've done a Zoom webinar, so I've forgotten where the controls are. All right, you can save this for later. Okay, about LSTA. So LSTA is Library Services and Technology Act. It is a federal grants program authorized by IMLS. LSTA is authorized by US Code 9121, and the funding is authorized by US Code 9141. So the federal government authorizes funds to LSTA. They're distributed by population to every state library. State libraries use those funds to advance library services in the state. So it's very much state local rule. Like, the federal government does not determine how we use these funds. We get to determine in Nevada how we use these funds. Right. And our award, as I said, is based on population. So as Nevada continues to grow, our award continues to grow. You can see there was a slight downward blip last year, and that wasn't because our population shrank, but another determining factor is maintenance of effort. So as is true for subgrantees, it's equally true for the state library. We are not allowed to use federal funds to supplant local funding, and that's maintenance of effort. So if a state reduces their maintenance of effort, if they reduce the amount of money they are able to contribute to state library services, they get their LSTA award reduced by the same amount. and then those funds are reallocated to everybody else. So that's why we got a little more money in 21 and we got a little more money in 23. Several states did not meet their MOE. Right. And so in Nevada, we subgrant. We allocate about 1/3 of our annual award to subgrants, and almost every single subgrant we do is discretionary. So that means there's a set amount or a maximum amount. Libraries apply and are awarded based on merit. We have occasionally done formula grants, but those aren't just flat out, here's money. It's you are going to get a certain amount of money, but it's still discretionary. You have to tell us what you're going to do and we have to approve it. So right now for 2023, we have competitive mini, planning grants, and CE grants, and those are all applications. And if your project has merit, it will be most likely awarded. I see Carrie Ward has a question. I think you're muted.
Yes, I do. I got it. Okay. So on the discretionary formula, does that mean on population, does that mean the number of just general population, or is it library users like patrons?
So we had a grant, a collection development grant for public libraries, and we used a population-based formula for that, right?
And
so the
what is, okay, go ahead.
Right, the more people you serve, the more money you got for your collection development grant. We had another, oh, I'm sorry.
What does one-off opportunity mean?
One-time things, they're not standard, right?
Okay.
You don't always do collection development grants. When we got ARPA funds, we did formula grants. And those are based on the number of physical locations your library had. You got X amount of dollars for every physical location.
Thank you.
But yeah, those are not standard. Okay, so that's it for a little bit about the LSTA program. We get it from the federal government. We use it to advance library services in Nevada. And we do it through subgrants. Community grants is your hand still up, Carrie? No, okay. Community grants is our grants management system. It's fairly new. Just some basics you might need or be curious about if you're curious about this. Community grants was developed by the state of Utah, and I literally spent a year investigating grants management systems, and I like this one the best. It did everything we needed to do for LSTA. It's built on the Salesforce platform. So if you're familiar with Salesforce, it's customer relations. So it's very, very good at those sort of customer relationship type duties. But that also means that if you're expecting a notification from the grant that you just submitted, it's going to come from Salesforce and it might get sent to your spam. So it's not going to come from sulin@admin.nv.gov. It's going to come from Sulin at Salesforce. And account registration is disabled. If you need an account, if anyone in your organization needs an account, they can contact me and I will get them account ASAP, right? Community grants has we have 2 different levels. There's the organizational account and then the user account. So Michael, you are with UNLV, you're going to have a UNLV account, right? You can't touch that.
Okay.
That belongs to UNLV, and I'm the only one who can do anything with that. It doesn't really mean anything, but it's your organizational account. And then users are attached to organizations, and all users who are attached to an organization have access to all of that organization's applications, right? One of the reasons self-registration has been disabled is I want some level of control over who has access to everybody's applications, right? If any organization out there wants to know who's attached to their account, I can tell them, right? But as a user, you can open up community grants and you should see all of UNLV's applications, right? So that's how that works. I can deactivate anybody. And for security, we do a password reset every 3 months. So if you've had staff leave, I can just deactivate them, or their password may have just already naturally reset itself. Any questions about how the accounts work? Okay. There are 4 modules activated in community grants. So the application, application review, reports, and reimbursements. And that's sort of, well, that is important. Every application is going to go through community grants. And it's really important that you get all your supporting materials uploaded at the same time you're submitting your application, because the review process is also through community grants. So if you don't get, if you email me your supporting documents, right, then I can manually put them into your grant, but I prefer not to do that. The evaluators, though, will have access to your application and all of the supporting materials. Okay, so the application is through community grants. The review, if you're a reviewer, you will review through community grants. If you're funded, all your reports will be through community grants, and all your reimbursements will be through community grants. Right, that's when you use that. And then you use the NSLAPR, LSTA email for everything else, right? The reason LSTA required docs aren't in the community grant side, it's because reviewers don't need to see all your legal certifications, right? That really has nothing to do with the merit of your project. So any official correspondence goes to that LSTA email. Unofficial correspondence can be to my personal email, right? Does that make sense? You're going to use community grants for reports, reimbursements, and application.
Yes.
Only. Okay. Okay, this is sort of what this is not sort of, this is exactly what you'll see when you log in. The little dots in the middle, the icons in the middle correspond to the menu items at the top. Apply is funding opportunities, update is my applications, review is panel review. Reimbursements doesn't have its own icon, but they're the same, right? You're going to do apply to apply for anything new. If you've already applied, you're going to go to my applications or update, right? So apply if you want to start something from scratch, update if you want to continue something or do a report or do a reimbursement. It'll be listed right now. I did this screenshot today. We have 4 grant opportunities available. If it's not there, then it's not available. Okay. And it shows you the close time. Once you've started an app, you're going to have all of these options. So you can edit and you can delete. If the icon's not there, that means you've submitted it and you can't do anything with it anymore. But if you do need to edit, you can let me know and I can put your application back in edit status or draft status. Portal tips. When you're entering things into the portal, you need to save. That's one glitch or one drawback. It's not a glitch, it's a drawback. It doesn't auto-save. And I know we're used to everything online and cloud-based being auto-save. It won't do that. So save all the time. Like every 2 minutes, save. I recommend that you do all your work in a different document. That may be duplication of work, but it will save you time if you accidentally don't save. Right. This is feedback on the last year of using this. The poor unfortunate souls who've lost all their data. Right. So save. Okay. And that's it for community grants. So any questions about how and when to use the portal and saving?
Do we send requests to revise our application to your personal or to the NSLAPR LSTA?
Oh, that would be, if it go, yeah, you could, if you want to edit an application, it's most likely because I've asked you to.
Okay.
But that is sort of official grant paperwork, so do it to the NSLA.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Okay. This is subgrant application prep. I have I've tried to put everything you will ever possibly need to write and manage an LSTA grant into these LibGuides. I've been told by various people that it's perfect. I've been told by various people that it's way too much information. I always err on the side of too much information, but that doesn't help you if you're new to this and you're not sure where you're supposed to go. So if you're not finding what you need, I have no problem at all with you emailing me or calling me and asking where something is. But it will most likely be in the scads of information that are in this LibGuide. So new for this year, I've created pre-application guidelines, and it's sort of the LSTA grants manual before you've been awarded the grant, right? This is 8 years worth of me answering questions and realizing what people maybe don't know and it would benefit them to know. So it's required reading. It's about the LSTA program, a little bit about eligibility, sub-grants, application section overview and allowable costs, a lot of which I'll be covering in this webinar, but like written in the document. The evaluation rubrics, the federal certifications, and the measuring success framework, right? Measuring success is Appendix C, but it's our next thing that we're going to cover. If you've applied for a grant, right, grant applications tend to have a structure, right? They're kind of plug-in information, they have a structure, and LSTA's structure is called measuring success, right? And the greatest challenge that I've seen over the years is, I think I've said this, people trying to figure out how their project can be squished into the measuring success framework. And it absolutely can. But the reason we have measuring success is because this is how it is reported up to IMLS. IMLS spent, I think, 3 years working with the states to develop this framework. And we've been using it for, I think, 8 years now. And so the application mirrors the final report. So if your project is funded, right, everything that I'm asking you in the application, I'm going to ask you in the final report. What did you do? What do you think you'll do? What did you actually do? Right. And measuring success's main points are as follows, right? LSTA is project and outcome based, right? There's no way around it. It's not just to buy things. You have to have a project supporting it. That doesn't mean the project can't be building capacity, and it absolutely can, but you have to tell us that this is a capacity building project, right? It also has to advance state and local goals, and the state goals advance federal goals, and the whole purpose of LSTA is to advance federal library goals. So you have to advance a state goal, and then you have to advance one of your local goals. It's very logical, right? Projects are informed by a need. I understand project inspiration comes from a lot of different places, right? It can come from anywhere, conversations, listservs, but ultimately, if you're going to implement this project, it has to address a real identified need of your community. And you do the project through activities. The activities result in outcomes by creating data, right? That is the whole measuring success framework. Goal, need, project, activities, data. If you're ever stuck on any of those, if you're ever stuck on what your outcomes are going to be, I suggest you think about your activities, think about all the data that's going to be generated, and we will come to that next. But there are required reporting bits and pieces. And if you think about the data and you think about the surveys, it will help you write your outcomes, because outcomes do seem, I understand outcomes are often a struggle, but that's why this framework exists. That's why IMLS developed it. It really helps you look at how you're going to get to your outcomes by looking at the data from the activities that you collect. So this is another pain point. There are 4 activities. No matter what project you have, you're gonna do one of these 4 things, or 4 of these 4 things. You're gonna do multiples of these 4 things. You're gonna teach people, and I don't mean to be snarky by putting verb and noun here, but I think it helps. Like, if your instruction is teaching people things and the end result is that they're learning, right? They're doing this, they're learning. Anything that you do that teaches, that exchanges information, that helps people learn and understand will be an instruction activity. And it will be categorized and put in the instruction bucket. Activity bucket number 2 is content. And content is information. It is a thing. It is books and all those things I have listed there. And if the end result, if your output is a book, if it's a learning guide, if it's a website, if it's a thing that a concrete noun that's information, it goes in the content bucket. You can scan things, you can digitize things, you can preserve things, but they're still content, right? Planning and evaluation may sound like a verb, but the end result is actually a plan, right? Or an assessment, a written document. So that's meant to separate it out from all the planning and evaluation you do as part of your normal project management, right? If the end result is you create a plan or a policy, then you're doing a plan or evaluation activity. Procurement is also buying things, but it's buying things that aren't information. And if you have a capacity building grant, you're going to do procurement. Does that make sense? Those are your 4, those are IMLS's 4 categories. And that's the biggest challenge I always run across, like what goes in where. Let me know if you need help sorting that out. So also part of prep, all LSTA grants are subject to federal 2 CFR 200 and the Nevada State Administrative Manual Chapter 3000 grants, right? You do not have to worry about this. Like, seriously, you don't. A lot of the infrastructure in place in these applications already addresses all of these things, right? The only thing that you as an applicant need to be concerned about is your local rules and regulations for grants, right? Because that's another pain point. Applicants aren't always aware that they have local policies they have to follow as well, right? So I am the one who is tasked with making sure the program meets 2 CFR 200 and Nevada SAM. Don't worry about that. Worry about your local stuff, okay? Or don't worry about it. Just be aware of it. Okay. Federal timeline tends to confuse people. LSTA spans multiple years, and you've just got to wrap your head around the fact that LSTA year is always going to be a year behind your state year or your local year. LSTA 23 starts at the same year state year 24 starts, and it ends during state year 25. I don't know, right? yeah, state year 25. And this is kind of how the timeline goes, but just rule of thumb, LSTA is 1 year behind your local year. And yeah, any questions about that? No, okay. Questions about this always arise. So the applications have a project start date and a project end date. That just means your project activities can't start before the start date. You can't like go out and buy things or do things before the start date, or they don't count towards your grant and we can't reimburse you. We can reimburse you sometimes, or we can accept it sometimes. It's like a retroactive start date if you submit a justification. But if the project period is July 1st and you started all your activities and started buying things in May, it's highly unlikely those will be allowable, right? Project end dates are a little bit easier. Almost every project, oh, yes, Gary. Unmute. I think you're mute. Can you unmute?
Okay, sorry about that. So if we're applying for a grant that begins this July 1st for the 2023, for instance, any grant preparation that you do for a match, that if you use your time as a match, can't be done, and you cannot use that match until you tell, okay.
Yeah.
So even if it's like looking for contracts that you want to start on that date on July 1st, you have to, the time that you spend before July 1st is not counted as a match.
No.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah. Okay, so end date, pretty much every 23 sub-grant is going to end on August 31st, 2024. Given everyone a couple extra months. They used to end on June 30th, but what that does is give everyone a 1 month cushion. You really should target your end date to August 31st, but the world has been difficult in terms of procurement and supplies. And so that 1 month cushion is built in there. And it's very easy for me to give a 1 month extension to September 30th. It's a lot more difficult to go beyond that because I don't have the authority. IMLS has to consult their legal, and they need a really solid reason that the grant can't be completed by September 30th, 2024. I can't guarantee anything. So it's possible if your project can't be completed, then it can't be completed. So try not to let that happen. So the federal certifications, usually I don't have anybody sign these until they've been awarded a grant, because you don't have to sign them unless you've been awarded a grant. But there's a lot of information in the certifications that is useful to you to know beforehand while you're writing your application, right? And so in Appendix B, the pre-application guidelines, I list all of the things that you're going to be signing once you get awarded. And SIPA is an important one. If you are not SIPA compliant, you will not be able to buy things that access the internet unless you're an academic library, because academic libraries do not serve the general public and aren't subject to SIPA. But pretty much every other type of library serves the general public, even the special and research ones. The law libraries serve the general public. Children enter law libraries and so are subject to SIPA, right? The other one is equal access. So while you're building your project, you have to be aware that the federal government requires that you make sure this program is accessible to people with disabilities. You don't discriminate against age. you honor Title IX, and that you make every effort to accommodate people with limited English proficiency, right? So another really important thing is the debarment list. You've done all this prep work and you have, a vendor of choice selected. Run that vendor through the debarment checklist, and that link is in the pre-application guidelines too, because the vendor has to be allowed to do business with the federal government because they're getting federal money. The vendors on the debar list, then you can't use them. Okay. Is your hand still up, Carrie? Oh, no.
So I have a question. Do we have to check with the Nevada Secretary of State too to make sure that they have a business license?
That is a local policy.
Okay. Gotcha.
That is your local policy. You do have to make sure that they're not on the federal list, though.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And that's it for like all the prep. Okay. Any questions there? Okay. Oops. We're going to talk about the structure. Style advice. Applications are really narrative heavy, right? And they are read by reviewers. And you never want to assume the reviewers know anything about you or your library. And you never want to assume they understand your specific library. Jargon is the word I want to use, but that's not even it. I throw around grant terms all the time, and I have to remember that not everyone knows what I'm talking about. Right. So write for a general audience because the reviewers may not understand your specific area. Narratives are about storytelling. The evaluators need to understand your story, but we also have to put data in there. And the biggest thing here I saved for last, stories benefit from good editing, right? Even the best-selling authors have editors. So it depends on who you have access to, but I would encourage you to have other people read your application, right? So that the editing is there. Okay. And then sub-grant don'ts. These are all the things that I've seen over the years, right? Make sure your library is included in this project, right? It happens occasionally. There's this brilliant idea. Let's say you want to work with family, friends, and neighbors, and you have a project that works directly with them, but your library is not part of it, right? Your library has to be a part of it. It has to be part of that solution. You can't just buy stuff and give it to the FFNs, right? The library has to be involved somehow, right? Don't duplicate efforts, right? If another organization's already doing this, that's duplicating efforts, right? Don't do that. You can't use LSTA to replace your local obligations. If you are a public library and part of what you do is public computers, you can't use LSTA to replace what you're supposed to be doing, right? You can't use LSTA to replace staff. And you can't use LSTA for construction of any type. Rule of thumb is if you need something bigger than a screwdriver to install it, you can't buy it or use it. Okay. This is what most of the applications are going to look like. Most of them are going to have 15 sections. The sections with stars are the scored sections. They all fit into that measuring success framework. The things that aren't specifically called out in measuring success are things that evaluators have specifically requested that I include over the years. Those include timelines, staff resumes, and technical. Subsections 1 through 4, I'm not going to go I'm not going to go that deeply into any of these. What I'm going to do is give you my perspective on what evaluators want you to tell them in these sections, okay? Sections 1 through 4, you're telling me evaluators who you are. This is the intro, who you are, who your library is, and are you prepared, right? Have you done all your homework? Section 5 is the statement of need, and evaluators want to know, this is the big part, what the need is, right? How you know it's real. Why are you the best organization to do this? And what are the costs of not doing the project, right? LSTA is project-based. Projects are based on need. What's the need? What's your solution? Why are you the best solution? And I have it multiple times here, confirm it's not a duplication of effort, right? I've seen a couple projects just not get funded because they were duplications of something someone else was already doing, right? My biggest tip on this is don't force backward logic. It's very obvious when I read an application and you can tell, like, library wants to do a project and they're struggling to justify it, right? Like, they're struggling to connect the project to the community need. So that turns it into a library want. I want to do this project. Not my community would really benefit and needs this project, right? And the second part of this that I see disconnects with, done a brilliant job with your statement of need and your target audience, but then none of the rest of the application actually addresses it, right? You say you want to serve the underserved. You've done data that shows you don't serve all these people in this specific community, and then none of the activities or the promotion or anything are actually aimed at that one community, right? It doesn't mean that that's not going to happen, but it wasn't written out so that the evaluators can see, oh yes, I'm going to make every effort to make sure that my publicity gets to that target audience who never comes to the library. Like, saying you want to target someone who doesn't come to the library and promote it by posting flyers in the library is not going to help that target audience, right? So that statement of need, that's what evaluators are looking for. Does that make sense? Okay. Target audience, there's a narrative description here, and I don't know about the graphics, but I was trying to illustrate that, there's the homogeneous library staff and the homogeneous library users, but your staff and your users are very specific to your library, right? And most of us don't know who they are. So just saying it's, students at UNLV doesn't help us. So paint a nice little picture of who those library users are, right? Or if you're targeting it at staff, right? We have a lot of rural staff. We have a lot of like single what's the word I want? A lot of small libraries who have like one person running the library, right? We want to know what makes who they are. Okay. So that's it for need and target audience. Section 6 is worth 20% of your score, and it's the outcomes. Evaluators want to know what success looks like, right? You've heard that term before. What does success look like? And it's been said so often that I think the meaning has gone out of it. But seriously, what does success look like? You're going to do this project for these people, for your target audience. What does a good project look like for them? Right? That's what it's about. We want to increase early literacy skills. A good project is getting, increasing our board book circulation and getting new library card signups or something like that, right? Outcomes allow us to meet our goals. Like I put grassroots change there because that's really what it is. Your outcomes are the individual people who are participating in your program, and their change, that grassroots change, is what is showing that you're meeting your strategic goals. We start at the bottom to show that we're meeting these high-level goals. That's what this little graphic is supposed to be. The goals are up here, right? But they're like way up here. You've got to do the projects to get to the outcomes that show that you're meeting those goals. Where do you get the goals? You get them from your local strategic plan and from the Nevada LSTA plan, right? So we are obligated, the state of Nevada is obligated to show that we are meeting these federal goals. We take this federal money and we have to show that we're meeting these federal goals. And we do that through your projects and your outcomes, right? So that's the whole part of project-based outcomes. So we can demonstrate to the funders that our communities are experiencing positive change through our library programs in skills, knowledge, values, and behavior and enjoyment. Oh, here it is again. Skills, attitude, behavior, values, enjoyment. Measurable. You can measure these through your activity data. Again, if you're not sure of what your outcomes could be, think of your activities, think of the data that you're going to generate and what that means. If you have this many people attend a program, then that means that many people have been exposed to the skill that you're teaching, right? I have no idea if they actually learned it, but we have exposed 8 people to these early literacy skills, right? 8 families. So that's how you measure. Like we've had this many people access these new collections that we created, right? So that means you have this many, this many people have been exposed to this information. Here's a summary. I think I've said this multiple times, but your project is a need plus a solution. That's what your project is, and it leads to outcomes. The outcomes advance strategic goals. You'll measure the outcomes through your activity data. IMLS has a sort of a page on what they want to see, and this is my best interpretation of it, but feel free to read this. Yeah. Okay. Section 7, every subgrant application is going to talk about activities. Talked about activities earlier. There are the 4 buckets, right? Evaluators. So when evaluators read this, they're wondering, okay, we understand what your project is, but how are you going to make it happen? We understand you want everyone to be able to read better, but how are you going to actually make that happen? And that's through your activities. So a reportable activity, don't get too in the weeds. Don't get too in the weeds. It's got to be at least 10% of your time or your budget. Most projects have 2 to 3 activities, right? That most of them, there are some projects that have 1 activity if they're capacity building. But activities are tied to the budget. They are clearly tied to the target audience. They produce data. If you're more a visual person, this is how it all deconstructs itself. Right? Inputs transform into activities, transform into outputs, transform into outcomes. Oh, it's a repeat of the bucket slide. And then I promised you we talk about the required data that might help you figure out outcomes if you're struggling. And so I'm going to pop that into chat. It's structured so, it's how many programs are you having? How long did they last? How many people attended? How many things did you digitize? How many things did you preserve? How many frameworks did you create? Right. So bear that in mind when you're talking about your activities and your outcomes. If you want to get really, really in the weeds with activities, I've generalized it because at this point, it's fair. You don't really need to break it down further. But if you're funded, this is how you report things. There are 3 different types of instruction, 5 different types of content, 2 different types of planning, and only 1 type of procurement. This is helpful, Carrie? Okay. Yeah. Content is the most flexible. You can create it, right? You can lend it. If you're not sure, if you're going to buy books and you're not sure how to document that, you go with content lending and you do circulation, right? You're circulating these things. But if you can't track circulation, then maybe you want to focus on content acquisition. You acquired this number of early literacy books, right? If you're doing a website, you're creating content. Okay, section 8 is resources and timeline. And in this section, evaluators want to know that you've got a handle on everything, right? There's this big amorphous project idea, but now you've got to put it into an organized timeline, right? What you're going to do when and who's going to do it. And that's what this is all about. So the timeline is a Gantt chart. The activities on one line, months on the other. You check off when you're going to do it. Make sure that everything that you list in your application is on the timeline, because that is one thing evaluators do look for. If you say you're going to promote something or do a project and it's not on the timeline, you'll get dinged for it. Okay. Do I have a slide? Yes, there it is. Okay, partners. Partners gets a lot of people because partners are a big thing in grant world. But I do understand that partners actually sometimes make things challenging, right? So we love to see partners. IMS love to see partners. We love to see how libraries are working with other members of the community, other organizations, or vice versa. Other organizations are working with libraries because we are a neutral, central place of learning and openness. And but you don't have to have them, right? It's not required. If you have them, document it and tell us. If you have a formal partner, you have to do some sort of MOU, right? Because evaluators and me, the LSTA coordinator, we have to know what's going to happen if they cannot fulfill their part of the grant. And you say, I'm going to work with the schools to do programs there. I have to know what you're going to do if the school says, no, you can't come on campus, right? So that's why the yes, ma'am.
Is that different from contracting with vendors? Then you're
Vendors are paid staff.
okay. So these are partners that aren't paid, but you're working with.
Yes.
Okay.
Right. You're with a vendor, you have a contract. But
Yeah.
if you are working with the Boys and Girls Club and part of your project is going on site and doing activities there, they can get out of it, right? They don't have any obligation to let you do that. So I want to see a MOU, right? And not having that, not working with the Boys and Girls Club, it's not going to kill your project unless you don't have a backup. If this falls through, we will do it at this site, right? It's fine. So staff resumes. So by this, I'm not asking you for a resume that you would submit for a job. That is actually something that never occurred to me. But two people have asked about that recently. Staff resumes is, I am Sue Lynn, I'm the LSTA coordinator. I've been doing this for 8 years. I have read hundreds of grants, right? These are my skills in managing this. So the staff resumes is the people who are working on your project and what qualifies them to work on the project and what, project management skills they have. Right. This was a direct request from an evaluator. They wanted to know who was doing what. Right. So that's what staff resumes are about. Promotion is twofold. Ooh, we're running out of time. How are you going to let your target audience know about the project? So again, if you're trying to get the underserved, you have to promote it in ways that don't involve coming into the library, right? And then the second is, how are you going to make sure everyone understands these are federal funds, right? And with that said, you need to tag or put a sticker on pretty much everything you buy or create. Everything, everything. It's just fair that federal funds have to be authorized for these programs. And it's very important that the people paying taxes understand this project is funded by this funding source and we are benefiting, right? Okay. This is new as of last year. The words are in the full text of this acknowledgement of federal support is in the required LSTA assurances and certifications in that link. But what it's saying is, if you issue a bid, right, or a statement or a press release, you have to acknowledge the amount of federal funding, right? I'm doing a bid for a vendor for an evaluation and 100% of these funds are federal. Right. That is non-negotiable. So now we're in the budget sustainability part. Evaluators don't want surprises, okay? They've read 8 sections of your grant. Now they're reading your budget and it should all make sense, okay? Sustainability does not mean you have to continue funding the project. It's what happens after the funds are no longer there. Are you going to try and keep it going with local money? Do you have enough momentum to keep it going? For a plan and evaluation project, you talk about how you're going to implement the findings or the plan. Okay. Certain things are not allowable. Food and drink is a big one. Gifts are a big one. Fundraising is a big one. Equipment over 5,000 is allowable, but I have to have IMLS approve it. So you need to, if you're asking for anything per unit cost of over $5,000, I have to get that pre-approved by IMLS. And those are the things that we need. Section 10 is innovation. So the evaluators want to know what's new and exciting. Attachments, really literally anything that will help an evaluator understand. Photos are wonderful, right? If you have, I'm not even sure what it could be, but if you have photos, if you have surveys, if you have just any visual, attach it. Letters of support from anyone who might benefit from your project are highly encouraged. So if you're doing something for, a specific audience, if you can get someone from that specific audience to write a letter of support, that would be brilliant. Technical, that's the evaluator request. It's for typos, errors. Some errors are more blatant than others. I tend to have a lot of typos in things. I would never get my 2%. It's only 2%, so it won't kill you, but it is 2%. Okay. And then overall merit of your project is 10%. Right. If you have a brilliant project, you're going to get the full score, right? If it's you'll probably still get funded, but this gives the evaluators some teeth to make sure that the really good applications get funded. Okay. Section 15 is just the certification. I don't have to have any of these until the final app. Certification just is your people of authority, your figure of authority certifies that you have the right to apply for this application, right? Your organization knows that you're doing this and approves. Oh, all right, we'll speed it up. We have 3 minutes left. So review and ranking is new. It used to go through our state council on libraries and literacy. Due to recommendations from our outside evaluators, we're revising that this year. So there's 2 parts. Part 1 is technical. It goes to the LSTA coordinator. I'll read your app and make sure nothing is missing and everything is allowable. If there's anything glaring and that I feel needs to be addressed, I'll put your app back in draft and you can fix it. For competitive grants, there's kind of 2 parts to that. There's the proposal and then there's the optional first draft, right? For every other type of grant, I'll read it and I can revert it back, but nothing will go to the reviewers unless I've like green lighted it that it meets everything is there that needs to be there. Okay. The review panel will evaluate your grant per the published rubric. They have to sign conflict of interests, and they will review and rank. They'll make funding recommendations, and then I'll work with our administrator to finalize those recommendations, and we'll determine awards that way. Okay. Sorry, I'm rushing through this. Do you have any questions about this? Because this is the new part. Okay. Okay, wrap up. So again, there's that survey, the required survey. If you're viewing a recording of this, please complete the survey. Here are the deadlines. May 15th is the final deadline for mini planning and competitive grants, May 15th. So you've got almost 2 months. Projects will start July 1st. If you're doing a cycle 2 mini or planning grant, those deadlines are November 15th. Okay. A recap of the portal. Contact me if you need access. Final suggestions: have non-library staff read for context. Don't copy and paste. And what I mean is, don't copy and paste from another grant you've written, and don't just copy sections whole and use them again in other sections, right? Because I've seen that and it doesn't make a lot of sense, right? And it doesn't make a lot of sense if you've submitted this grant elsewhere and are trying to do it here. It's I don't know how I can tell, but I can tell when people are recycling grants. If you need help, let me know. And don't forget your target audience. Don't forget the LibGuide. And here is our contact information. There's me, Sulin Jones. the LSTA email, which goes to me and our admin assistant, Nina Frazier, and community grants. And that is it. I'm going to stop recording.